Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to make some chocolate chip cookies. Why? Because what better comfort food is there in this social distancing pandemic? We're going to make that. We're also going to review the book called The Grace Year by Kim Leggitt. So what do you need first? You need a recipe, whether you find it online or you have a well-loved recipe of your own. And then you gather the ingredients. So you look down the list and you put them all together, and then you have your supervisor come in through just to see if you have your ingredients correct. And then of course you have your measuring cups and your spoons, and you have your mixer. So the first thing is that you have the cream, shortening, and sugars. In this case, the shortening is one of these. Did I add that you need a big mixing bowl? Because I should have. All right, so now we need the sugars, which is 1 cup of sugar, regular sugar, 1 cup. And then we need 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and with brown sugar, they usually say to pack it. Now when it says cream, you're going to use your mixer. All right, so we're going to say that that's creamed. Now we're going to add our eggs and beat well. I forgot to display the eggs along with my ingredients here, so we need 2 eggs. It's bonus points if you don't get any shell in the cookies. So one of the reasons why I chose to bake chocolate chip cookies is I needed something uplifting after reading The Grace Year. Unfortunately, it is very violent and difficult to take at this point in time with the whole social distancing and not being able to see your friends and talk to other people face to face. So here's my review of The Grace Year by Kim Leggitt. Back to our mixer. Next is we add the dry ingredients, okay? And so our dry ingredients left are our flour, our baking soda, our vanilla. We've got a little bit of salt. So let's do the flour because it's a lot. It's 2 cups. Did I say that your hands should be clean and that they should have been washed prior to the start of this activity? Okay, that's what it looks like after 1 cup of flour. But you do not want to forget the other cup, because these will not come out well if you don't put in enough flour. Okay, now we need our baking soda. That's 1 TSP. Right there. Baking soda. Pure. But to see unpure baking soda. And they say 1 teaspoon of salt, but we always go less on the salt. So I'm going to do 1/2 teaspoon. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We do like it. You can kind of taste it. And I think it's a good taste. And 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Okay, so finish up that other one. There, boom. And that's for the little bit that I shorted it. Alright, so we got vanilla, salt, baking soda. That's it. We're going to give it another swirl around. And there's our finished dough. We just got to add the chocolate chips. If you use 2 cups strictly, there's always like a little small handful for the baker, which is good. I'm going to take a break while I ready the cookie pans. And while I'm doing that, you should listen to the book review for the Grace Year. I can think of a lot of reasons why you shouldn't read The Grace Year by Kim Leggitt. If you are easily triggered by trauma, if you are really tired of dystopian societies while living in seemingly one in a pandemic world, if you are an easily threatened male, if you like a bunch of happy endings, you're not going to find very many. But most of all, the violence in The Grace Year is just over the top. If you believe that young people should be given the freedom to read almost whatever they want, including dark and deeply disturbing books, then is there any book that is just too much? Is there any book that crosses the line? And is there even a line? Well, clearly there's a line, but where is it? Does the line involve skinning beautiful young girls alive, having them in as much pain as possible because it makes their blood better? Yes, I think the line for violence against women is drawn somewhere around there, and the Grace Year crosses the line. Now let's take a break from this review and see more about baking those cookies. Okay, now that you've heard a little bit about the Grace Year, thanks for coming back to the cookie making. You've done the following things already. You've preheated the oven to whatever your recipe calls for. In this recipe, it's 375. Now, every oven's a little different. Some are hotter, some run a little cooler. So just note, our oven always seems to run a little hotter. So the recipe says that you need to bake the cookies for 7 to 8 minutes. I always go for 7 because our oven runs a little warm. You've put cookie sheets with parchment paper. It really does make a difference. You've gotten them ready, and now you're ready to plop the cookie dough down. I always just go by feel, couple inches apart. Sometimes I can get either 3 or 4 to a row, depending on how big you want the cookie to be. There is like a sweet spot, excuse the pun, with how big you want the lump of cookie dough to be, because if you make it too big, the cookie is just not as tasty, and if you make it too small, it leaves you wanting more cookie. So what I do is I make up both trays. And then I'm only baking one at a time. So when one comes out, I put the other one in. And the reason I do that is because, at least to our oven, there's a big variation of temperature between the top and the bottom rack. So if I was to put both in, then one of the trays would have to stay a little bit longer than the other one. So I just don't want that complexity right now in my life. I'm trying to keep it simple. All right, so we're going to put our first tray in. And this is the very important part, is you're going to set the timer for exactly 7 minutes. I read The Grace Year by Kim Leggitt faster than any book I've read in years. I think I read it in 3 days, but I cannot recommend The Grace Year. I can't recommend it for the same reason that I don't ever recommend reading The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I can't get the images out of my head ever. The Road just scarred me mentally. If you're a person that can stomach horrific things so traumatizing that just the memory of reading about them, or in the case of The Road by Cormac McCarthy, also watching them in the movie version, causes severe grief, then have at The Road and have at The Grace Year. But I think in these times when young people are more anxious than ever, with good reason, and when mental health is so at the forefront, and when we are made to doubt our very eyes and ears by assaults on the truth, then a book that crosses the horrific line is not a book that I want to recommend to a wide number of teens. By the way, if you're made to read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, I think there's a class or two that might read it, or it might be on a couple-year cycle. And if it's your year to read The Road, then certainly that's just my impression. It's not everybody's impression of it. It's a great and amazingly well-written book. I just can't get the pictures out of my head, which I guess that's a good writer. If you have readers that reaction happens. The Grace Year is a page turner. If you like dystopian novels, then this is definitely in your wheelhouse. From the first chapter, you are immersed in a combination of some of the best dysfunctional worlds in past and present history. The Crucible, The Hunger Games, The Lord of the Flies, and The Lottery are all clear influences. For example, the Salem witch trial story of The Crucible is summoned with teen girls flying, older men leering, and witches being burned alive. The Hunger Games is present in a fateful selection scene where think the worst game of schoolyard captains picking sides combined with the high stakes of being married and considered property of a person that you hate. And don't forget that Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, where a town has no idea how a yearly stoning sacrifice started, but they feel the need to carry it out without any questions asked. All these things are in The Grace Year. As The Grace Year progresses, we learn that in order for the wealthy and lucky, snicker, townspeople to carry on their way of life, all girls that are 16 must be subject to banishment. Sounds somewhat familiar to our current situation? The girls are banished as a group and they're taken to an island fortress. Once again, a dystopian novel explores an inside group and fear of what lies outside, a la The Maze Runner and dozens of other inside safe, outside danger books. The premise is that these girls come into an amazingly powerful magic during their 16th year. This magic must be bled out of them painfully as possible. Who's applying the pain? Is it the poachers who do the skinning alive? Is it the townspeople that practice a bizarre form of cannibalism, eating parts of the young girls to make them potent? Or are the girls themselves the worst, ordering rituals that only the strongest leader among them can decide? There's a lot to be terrified in The Grace Year. And when we find out that the well is poisoned intentionally to make the girls go insane, we realize that we've met the enemy and he is us. Any minute now, the buzzer will ring, telling us that the first batch will be ready. Now you grab your pot holder. Put it on the top to cool a minute or two. Put in your next one. Don't forget to set your timer again. Another 7 minutes. Now while these are cooling, I have prepared the cooling racks. Did Miss Liggett really need to have girls be skinned alive with hours of painful screaming and death? Did she really need girls controlling other girls so completely that they would cut off their own fingers, ears, and toes. All these things and more await you when you read the grace year. Try not to read it in less than 3 days. I really suggest you don't. Now let's go and see our last batch here. Oh, look at that. This is the last batch came out. Now I made one cookie without any chocolate chips. And it looks like it's in the shape of a paw. In case you haven't noticed, my supervisor has been so good throughout the whole thing. I made him a special paw cookie. No chocolate chips, because you're never supposed to give chocolate chips to dogs. And so now he's going to get his reward for being a good supervisor. Thanks, supervisor.